You look like you could do with a cuppa.
Great. She tried to inject some enthusiasm into her voice. He meant well, and she knew he was lonely, but it was an early visit. She could have done with a sleep-in this weekend. What are you doing here? I've been on night shift all week.
Fed the girls for you.
His eyes crinkled at the edges. Emma softened.
And I collected the eggs.
George lifted up a bowl full of brown, speckled eggs, and Emma gave in to a grin. How could she stay cross with the old coot? He loved keeping an eye out for her, and she appreciated it. As usual, his pants were secured with a bit of fencing wire, and his khaki work shirt hung open, most of the buttons missing. The old T-shirt underneath proclaimed, "Leave the Daintree alone." A few months back, he'd taken great pride in showing Emma and Mum the teeth marks where the German Shepherd police dog had ripped the T-shirt back in '83, when he'd been part of the demonstration against logging in the rainforest. They'd been trying to block the road being developed to Cape Tribulation. Emma hadn't even been born then. She walked over to the window and leaned over the sink. The stiff sash window creaked as she pushed it up to let more fresh spring air into the musty kitchen. Stretching up to her tiptoes, she leaned forward and glanced down at the riverbank at the bottom of the yard. "Where's the punt? Didn't swim, did you?"
Not bloody likely. I've seen what's in that water, he said with a shiver. I came the long way. Have to drive up to Cooper Creek. Got a big day planned. Thought I'd call in and bring you some tomatoes on the way. I came over and checked on Bowser every day, like you asked.
George lived across the river in the small village of Daintree. Emma's house was on the other side, about half a kilometre upriver, and unless you took the vehicular ferry and then the long, winding back road through Cooper Creek, the only other way to reach her place was by boat. She had a small punt that could be pulled across the water by hand. It was one of the reasons that she'd got Crooked Cottage and the acre of land so cheap. It was only a short walk along the path on the riverbank to the small village. It wasn't really even a village. There were only half a dozen houses and a coffee and craft shop for the tourists that was closed more often than it was open. "Thanks, you're a gem. What are you up to today?"
"A bit of this and a bit of that."
He wouldn't meet her eye.
"Look, I bought you some crickets for your frogs."
A brown paper bag appeared from deep in his back pocket, and he handed it to her.
"I gave the frogs a squirt every day, too, and switched around their basking bulbs. Can't have them freezing to death while you're out working yourself to the bone."
George crossed to the wooden stand that was tucked into an alcove where the old combustion stove had once stood, her terrarium now filling the space. He ran his hand down the rough timber and turned to her with a wide grin.
"Geez, the bloke that built this stand for you sure did a good job."
"You did, and there's no need to suck up. I'm awake now."
"All the tadpoles hatch okay this time?"
"Yes, this batch has been really successful." Emma followed him over and reached up and turned the night bulb off, replacing it with the daylight basking bulb from the shelf at the bottom of the stand.
"Do you reckon if I got some tadpoles, that research mob would pay me too?"
Emma laughed and shook her head. "You know I'm not getting paid. You could volunteer too. A few other locals are logging some breeding cycles." George shrugged, and a soft grunt escaped his lips.
"I bet those blokes at the rainforest tend to get paid."
Emma slipped in the new bulb and patted his shoulder on her way back to the sink to make the tea. "Of course they do. They work at the Rainforest Tourist Centre. They're National Parks and Wildlife staff." She pulled down 2 mugs from the cupboard and 2 tea bags and leaned back against the sink as she covered a yawn with one hand. "God, it's been a big week. Down 1 doctor and waiting for the new guy to arrive."
"Lots of sick people?"
"Yep, and a few accidents too." There had been a constant stream of patients at the hospital at night and at her clinic all day. Murphy's Law. It always happened when they were understaffed. She picked up the brown paper bag next to the sink and peeked inside.